Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain, and we look at them with our modern eyes and our modern perspective and see what we can learn from them. So in this microfiche time capsule, I'm looking at an article in Kansas Farmer from 21 December 1918 called Influenza and Face Masks in Influenza Cases. 2 articles, same page. This is the one and only article I found in the entire year of 1918 about the Spanish flu. And I wanted to talk about it because the Spanish flu was not talked about very much, at least in countries participating in World War I. Spain, being one of the only countries to not participate in the war, was one of the only countries also to maintain records on it about the number of cases, about outbreaks, about the spread, about mandating face masks and things like that to stop the spread of influenza. And that's why it's called the Spanish flu. The flu did not start in Spain, and I did mention this on another article. However, since not everybody has seen that one, I'm sure I will reiterate it here. Just a little historical information. The Spanish flu, which did not start in Spain, started in the U.S., in Kansas, as a matter of fact, which is why I chose Kansas Farmer to be a newspaper that might be interesting around 1918. Turns out they didn't write about it until December 21st. Nice try, considering the outbreak was in like February or March. And so what happened was, it was a very cold winter. The soldiers decided to, the winter of 1917-1918. So the soldiers decided to burn different things that they could get from the farms nearby in order to keep warm when they were doing any sort of outdoor duty. So they start little bonfires or little like barrel fires, and just keep themselves warm. Mostly burning animal feces. I don't know what kind of animal, I think it was mixed, but they got them donated from the farms when they didn't need it. So that's great in theory. However, it didn't work out in practice because it turns out that some of the animals had some form of influenza that was extremely deadly to humans. Great! So soldiers started getting sick. Started with patient 0. And so this was on my article, that I mentioned this on an article about Fort Riley Hospital, because it is, that's where patient 0 was treated. It spread really, really quickly. So lots of people got sick very quickly. 3 soldiers even died within the first week or 2, but they didn't classify it as an outbreak of any sort of problem. They kind of just chalked it up to, it was cold winter. And they sent the soldiers to war in Europe, where influenza spread like nobody's business all over the continent. Came back to the U.S. by soldiers visiting their families, or people coming to hospitals, going to the doctors saw other patients, things like that. It spread very, very quickly. The only country not involved in World War I declared neutrality was Spain. And Spain then kept very detailed records. However, because they were in the middle of a world war, the Great War, they called it then, they, like most governments, decided that it should not be published. They shouldn't make a big deal about the Spanish flu, because the bigger news is actually the war itself, which is ironic because I'm pretty sure, in fact I'm almost 100% sure, that the Spanish flu killed more than World War I did. In fact, I'm going to Google that really quick, just fact-checking myself. The Spanish flu, I do know this, killed between 50 and 100 million. It's hard to estimate precisely because it wasn't always documented properly. It was very often listed as pneumonia, or it would be listed as a cough or something like that when it was actually the flu. So, let's see, how many people died in World War I? 40 million. And the low estimate on the Spanish flu was 50 million. That was the low estimate. Upper estimate at 100 million. So yeah, Spanish flu killed more people than the war did. However, the war was all over the newspapers. Spanish flu was almost nowhere to be found. So, I still think it's weird calling it Spanish flu. It's not from Spain, people. So, let's take a look at this one and only article on the Spanish flu in Kansas Farmer in the year 1918. It's ironic, but I knew it had to come up at some point, and Kansas Farmer is a small enough newspaper with a small enough circulation that I don't think it would be on the government's radar. They probably did not get in trouble for this, but they might have, who knows. Anyway, influenza. The disease now spreading over this country is highly catching and may invade your community and attack you and your family unless you are very careful. That's an understatement. Influenza is a crowd disease. Therefore, keep out of crowds as much as possible. So influenza spreads basically the same way the coronavirus spreads, so lung particles. Masks, wash your hands, that kind of thing, social distancing, all of that would have helped. Influenza probably spreads mostly by inhaling some of the tiny droplets of germ-laden mucus sprayed in the air when ignorant or careless persons sneeze or cough without using a handkerchief. Well, yeah, therefore cover up each cough and sneeze. Well, that helps, but it's also breathing out. So, influenza was probably spread also by the filthy habit of spitting on sidewalks. Well, that doesn't help, sure. Streetcars and other public places. Therefore, do not spit on the floor or sidewalk. Also good advice. Influenza is probably spread also by the use of common drinking cups and the use of common towels in public places. Yeah, that's probably true as well. Common drinking cups? They really had common drinking cups? Like you go to a public restroom and there's a drinking cup there? That is so disgusting. Yuck. Maybe they stopped using them after this, but that's, yuck. Sorry. Therefore, shun the common drinking cup and the roller towel in public places. If you feel sick and believe you have Spanish influenza, go to bed and send for the doctor. This is important. Don't get up too soon. Your heart feels as tired as your legs and needs rest. Good advice, yeah. Get enough rest until you actually feel better. Yeah. In all health matters, follow your doctor's advice and obey the regulations of your local state health officers. All that has been said about Spanish influenza is true also of colds, bronchitis, pneumonia, and tuberculosis. Do your parts to keep them away. Yeah, all good advice. However, tuberculosis is not nearly as catching, but most of the other ones are. Pneumonia actually is not. Pneumonia can be caused by so many different things. It's just basically means that your infection has settled in your lungs. But it doesn't actually specify what kind of infection it is, so it could be from a lot of different things. It could have started as bronchitis and gone to pneumonia. It could have started as the flu and gone to pneumonia. It could have started as something you inhaled and gone to pneumonia. People who almost drown will often end up with pneumonia afterwards, which can also turn deadly, so that's also called secondary drowning. It's related at any rate. Sleep in the fresh air. Sleep in the fresh air? What do you mean by that? You want me to sleep outside? Did people sleep? This is December. Like, they really want you to sleep outside? Or they want you to sleep with an open window or something? What does that mean? Sleep in the fresh air, work in the fresh air, and if sick from any cause, insist on fresh air. Well, that will stop the spread, yeah? Well, it will slow the spread, but it's not going to make you get better faster. It might bring down your fever. I don't know. It's just very funny to me. Oh, gosh. Okay. I'm also interested in this secondary article, Face Masks in Influenza Cases. Influenza enters the body through the mouth or nostrils and in no other way. I disagree. You could also get it from a blood transfusion or having sex with someone who is sick. I mean, yeah, like close bodily contact, you could definitely get it that way. I don't think that that's the only way you can get it. The contagion is, oh, you could also spread it through hand contact, yeah? Like if somebody sneezes on their hand and then shakes somebody else's hand, yeah, you could spread it that way too. Like there are lots of ways to spread it. So saying that it's only through the mouth and nostrils is actually misinformation. Good job. Good job, 1918. I thought we were done with misinformation. Clearly we're not. I'm just kidding. There's still misinformation out there today. Sorry. That was a bad joke. Okay, moving on. The contagion is given off through sputum and other secretions in the mouth and nose of the sick, and in no other way. Sure. No other way. It may pass from the sick to the well by coughing or sneezing in their presence, by kissing or using towels, handkerchiefs, cups, glasses, spoons, or other household utensils in common. Contagious factor may find lodgment in dust of the home, office, shop, sidewalk, or street, and from these reach the mouth or nostrils of the well and infect them. So it's a warning against how contagious it is, yeah? It is obviously of first importance to prevent the infection from leaving the sick. What? Okay. Gosh. Like it's a ghost or something? It's gonna leave their body? It is obviously of first importance to prevent the infection from leaving the sick. I know what they mean, but it's just, that's a really funny way of saying it. They're basically saying, like, we want to try and stop the spread. So if somebody is already sick, then we need to try and prevent them from getting anyone else sick. That's great. That's a very good goal. Very, very funnily worded. Very funny. A new, simple, cheap, and successful device has been developed. This was a new thing? It is called a face mask. It is made of 4 thicknesses of plain, unmedicated gauze, about 4 inches wide and 6 inches long, with a small tape or string sewed to each corner. It is just large enough to cover the mouth and nostril, with allowance for shrinkage, and is tied back of the head with 4 strings. It freely admits the air and breathing and prevents the escape of droplets and expiration, coughing, or sneezing. If such a mask is promptly applied in early stages of every case of influenza, there will be little or no spread of the disease. Attendants of the sick should also wear a gauze mask, but 2 or 3 ply of the gauze is enough for protection mask. Bulletin, Kansas State Board of Health. Really? Was this a new thing? I gotta fact check this one. When were face masks invented? Look at that. Modern surgical masks began to be used in the 1960s. Okay, that's much later than this. It's like 50 years later. Interesting. Also known as other names such as medical face mask or procedure mask, is a personal protective equipment used by healthcare professionals. Okay. Random controlled trials, blah, blah, blah. I want to know history. Okay. Face masks for use in surgery were developed in Europe by several physicians, including blah, blah, at the University of Breslau and Paul Berger in Paris of the late 19th century as a result of increasing awareness of germ theory and the importance of antiseptic procedures in medicine. In response to pneumonic plague in Manchuria and Mongolia in 1910, Chinese Malaysia epidemiologist greatly improved the designs he had seen. Sorry, I'm not reading all the names. If they're even a little bit hard to read, I'm just going to skip over. I will put them on the screen, okay? Greatly improved on the designs he had seen in Europe to develop a face mask of layers of gauze and cotton that would protect both the wearers and others. So it was like recently developed, recently invented, because in response to a pneumonic plague, I did read about this. Early 20th century, there was an outbreak of the plague. It was not only in China, it also managed to make its way to San Francisco. So there was an early 20th century outbreak of the plague in the United States. It is not something most people know about. But I have to plug this one. So Caitlin Doty from Ask a Mortician, go and check out her video because it's amazing. She did a video about a year ago on the bubonic plague in San Francisco, and it's amazing and really, really well researched. So if you are interested in that topic, go over to her channel and check it out. However, she did not mention that masks were invented around that time. I think that was because she was looking at the San Francisco side of it, and this was invented in the China side of it. So germ theory had just basically been a thing at the time. They discovered that the spreading of disease is caused by germs, and one way to prevent them, based on the kind of virus you're looking at, is to wear a face mask. And that bubonic plague, or in this case pneumonic plague, which is the lung infection plague version, and it was also airborne, whereas bubonic plague was not. It was spread by the fleas. It was relatively easier to keep under control. I mean, relatively. Dealing with fleas has its own issues, but it's not spread by people coughing on each other. It's a lot harder to control. So they started wearing face masks with several layers of cotton gauze. That's interesting to me. I had no idea. They didn't start using them in surgery until the 1960s. Oh, I'm not even... Really? No, it's just because I'm doubting this only for one stupid reason, and it's a really dumb one, okay? Is I have seen... I'm kind of a fan of a couple of really old actresses, and one of them is Shirley Temple. I have always been a Shirley Temple fan. I just really love her work, and I think that she was a really amazing actress and was actually slightly underrated for her acting abilities and slightly overrated for her cuteness. But she was actually really quite good at what she did. If you ever watch her movies, let me know if you agree or disagree. Feel free to have your own opinion. But there's an old one, one of her first movies. I'm trying to remember what it's called. This is why we have Google, right? Yeah, Little Miss Marker. That's it. Yeah, her father loses a bet, and then the group of gangsters basically have to take care of her because he used her as his marker that he was going to pay his debt, but then he lost, and yeah. And I think he kills himself or something. Yeah, he kills himself. And so then they have to take care of the child. And they're not sure what to do with him. There's bookies and stuff. But I remember the very end, she gets thrown by a horse. She has some internal damage, internal bleeding, and she needs a blood transfusion. It's super important. Now, obviously, they don't do this today. But back then, they had decided she needed a blood transfusion, and they were looking at the different people who were with them. There's a whole group, and this bad guy ends up being the one that has the same blood type as her. And so they didn't say what blood type it was. They're just making this up as they go along, I think. But the doctors who were overlooking the transfusion and making sure it went well, and they had to do surgery on the little girl, who they called Marky, by the way, as the marker. While they were doing the surgery, they were wearing masks. They didn't cover their noses, but they were wearing masks. What I would consider a cloth mask. Kind of the cheaper versions, we started out wearing in the pandemic. So, I know this is not at all scientific, but Little Miss Marker was made in 1934. That's a little earlier than 1960, so I don't know, how early they really started. Okay. I should read the whole article. Here we go. Modern surgical masks began to be used in the 1960s. Their adoption caused cloth face masks, which had been used since the late 19th century, to completely fall out of use in the developed world. However, cloth masks and surgical masks both continued to be used in developing countries. Yeah, see? Read the rest of the article. Jeez, Micah. Anyway, sorry. Moving on. So they were wearing cloth masks in that film, and most surgeons would have at that point, starting in the late 19th century. Okay. And then they started using like gauze, cotton gauze masks. Like, what? How is that not cloth? I mean, it's cloth. It's just very like light cloth. I don't know. It seems a little strange, like they would specify so clearly. Maybe it's because they have multiple layers and they were like one-time use now instead of ones you could wash and reuse, which ended up being less effective, and they decided to only use the one-time use surgical masks. I think that's what they're saying, but it's interesting that this article really makes it sound like they had just invented these masks and that people should use them for to stop the spread, and that this is a brand new invention. It's not a new invention so much as it is a rehashing of an old invention. That, well, it's not that old, but it's relatively new. But it wasn't invented just for influenza. That's interesting to me that they're addressing directly the pandemic starting in December 1918, which is after the end of World War I, in November of 1918. It was just after peace was declared, so to speak. So I guess there might not have been any more sanctions on talking about it anymore. And then the editors of the newspaper were like, well, let's talk about it then. Yeah. So now it's in here, but it's not on the front page. It's still not. It's so frustrating. Anyways. Sorry, I have to laugh at myself on this one because, you know, it's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. So moving on. But I hope you enjoyed this Microfiche time capsule, and I'm so glad that they finally started to talk about the Spanish flu. Took them long enough, but they did eventually get to it. So I very much enjoyed that, and I hope you did too. And please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.